On July 4, 1902, the Eureka, Nevada, Eureka Narrow Gauge and Palisade Railroad sponsored a picnic excursion train for Independence Day. Passengers rode in boxcars attached to locomotive number 5, Palisade 440, a Baldwin steam engine built in 1876. The short 86-mile line operated between Eureka and the Union Pacific Station in Palisade from 1875 to 1938. During the circus season lasting from 1937 to 1938, Tom Mix drove a rare and powerful car. It was a 1937 Cord 812 supercharged Phaeton. This model featured a V8 engine with a supercharger, giving it extra speed and performance. The car also boasted a sleek and innovative design, with retractable headlights and a chrome grille. Tom Mix was a famous Western film actor known for performing stunts and action scenes with his car. He was one of the attractions of the circus, which traveled around the country showcasing their spectacles. In the late 19th century, a group of visionaries led by William F. Cody, better known as Buffalo Bill, and George T. Beck, a businessman and politician, planned the founding of a city in northwest Wyoming, United States. They chose a strategic location near the Shoshone River and the east entrance of Yellowstone National Park, the world's first national park. They believed the city would be a tourist attraction. February 13, 1866. A dozen former Confederates robbed the Clay County Savings Association in Liberty, Missouri. They make off with about $58,000, just under $1 million in today's money. Spectator George Wymore is shot and killed by one of the robbers. Joseph and Francis Corbal were two brothers born in Bohemia, a historical region in Central Europe. They immigrated to the United States in the late 19th century in search of opportunities and adventures. Over time, they became very wealthy and famous for their high-quality products. They founded Corbal champagne cellars, which are still among the most renowned in the world today. Even with the technological advancement of automobiles, it was still possible to find on the rural roads of Montana in the early 20th century some freight trains using outdated railway lines built in the 1880s. Manny Hyman's Saloon is where Doc Holliday's last shootout takes place. Leadville overshadows Tombstone, Arizona territory, with its 120 saloons, 118 gambling halls, 110 beer gardens, and 35 brothels. See the contraption on the walk beside the clock. It's an early electric meter. Leadville got electricity for the first time in 1883. Ernest Burkhart, a nephew of wealthy white rancher William King Hale, married Molly Kyle, a Native American woman from the Osage Nation, in 1917. Molly was unaware that Ernest and Hale planned to kill members of her family to inherit the mineral rights they held under Osage reservation lands. They were arrested and convicted in 1926 after an FBI investigation. To cope with the intense cold on the border, soldiers were issued an essential Army clothing kit. The kit contained socks, long underwear, undershirts, pants, and wool coats. However, the clothes were of poor quality and didn't last long. After a few washes, they became torn, holey, and faded. Soldiers had to make do with what they had as there were no replacements. The Bartlesville area, located in Cherokee Indian Territory, underwent a major transformation in the late 19th century. In 1897, an oil well was successfully drilled in the region, sparking a black gold rush. 2 years later, in 1899, a railroad line was built to facilitate the transportation of oil and other products. These events attracted many new residents and investors to Bartlesville, changing the landscape and economy of the place. The G.S. Garcia Harness Shop was a famous leather goods and saddlery store founded by G.S. Garcia, a Spanish immigrant who settled in Elko, Nevada, in the late 19th century. The shop produced harnesses, saddles, boots, hats, and other high-quality items, which were appreciated by cowboys, ranchers, and rodeo performers. In 1913, the shop moved from Silver Street, where it had been operating since 1894, to Commercial Street, a busier and more central street in the city. This saddle is a historical piece dating back to 1890, a time when India was still a British colony. It was discovered at the Townsend and Pickett Ranch, a rural property located in Indian Territory, a region that now belongs to the states of Oklahoma and Kansas, United States. The saddle has a simple yet functional design, with a wooden frame, a leather seat, and metal stirrups. In the late 19th century, Lake County, California, was a popular tourist destination for its natural beauty and hot springs. However, the region lacked rail access, making it difficult for visitors to arrive. Therefore, they had to opt for other means of transportation, such as steamboats navigating the lake or horse-drawn carriages traveling the roads. One of the most sought-after spots by travelers was the Tallman House, an inn that offered comfort, food, and entertainment. On a cold winter day, the famous outlaw Belle Starr was riding back to her cabin in Younger's Bend, Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. She had spent the previous night at a party at a friend's house and was carrying a new saddle she had received as a gift. Little did she know that someone was waiting for her hidden behind a bush, ready to shoot. As she approached, 2 shots rang out. One struck her horse, which fell to the ground. The other hit her back, piercing her heart. On one of the busiest streets in Prescott, where bars and gambling houses lined up, there was a saloon that stood out from the rest. It was the Cobweb Hall, so named because of the spider webs covering the ceiling and walls. The place was frequented by all sorts of people, from miners and cowboys to drifters and adventurers. G.S. Garcia, pictured second from the left in a 1913 rodeo photo, originally built his G.S. Garcia harness shop on Silver Street in Elko, Nevada, in 1907, but in 1913 moved the building to Commercial Street. His shop now pays homage to Garcia's legacy and cowboy history as the Cowboy Arts and Gear Museum. For decades, studio prop houses relied on the abundant Springfield 1873 rifle to mimic a flintlock firearm, including in this scene from John Wayne's 1960 epic, The Alamo. A set of brass or metal frizzen and frizzen screw, hammer, was installed over the original Springfield lock plate, atop the original hammer and lock plate. In this historic photo, we see renowned saddle craftsman G.S. Garcia proudly displaying one of his leather masterpieces. He stands next to a saddled horse in front of his shop in Santa Margarita, a small town in the state of California, United States. The image was captured sometime in the 1880s, when Garcia was one of the most famous saddle makers in the American West. General Francisco Pancho Villa, who was one of the most famous leaders of the Mexican Revolution, owns the most expensive saddle in the Western world. This saddle, which he used in several battles against the governments of Porfirio Diaz, Victoriano Huerta, and Venustiano Carranza, was auctioned for $625,000. A stern-looking man, Sheriff James E. McGee, 1870 to 1914, was recognized as one of the most honest peace officers who helped clean up southern Arizona from the bad element that had dominated the territory for decades. After his sudden death due to stomach complications, he was praised as a brave officer, a Western man, and one of Arizona's best shots. James Stott was a cowboy and rancher born in North Billerica, Massachusetts, in 1863. He moved to Arizona in search of adventure and opportunity, but ended up involved in a bloody conflict known as the Pleasant Valley War. This conflict was a feud between 2 rival cattle-raising families, the Grahams and the Tewksburys, who accused each other of stealing and killing their livestock. George Swan built his slippery Ford house in El Dorado County, California, during the early 1860s to provide food and lodging for about 200 stagecoach passengers daily heading to the Comstock Lode in Nevada. It was never known, however, whether the cook of several relay stations took care to avoid her dog's hide or her children's dirty hands while preparing meals. Cowgirls of the Old West were women who worked on cattle ranches or participated in rodeos and shows in the 19th and early 20th centuries. They faced the same challenges and dangers as cowboys, such as dealing with wild animals, outlaws, Native Americans, and storms. Some cowgirls became famous for their skills and courage, such as Annie Oakley, Calamity Jane, and Pearl Hart. They represented an image of freedom, adventure, and independence in American culture. In Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the setting of the 1980 film The Mountain Men, a background Indian actor carries a .45, 70 blank cartridge in the breech of a stone studio, made from a Springfield 1873 rifle and fitted with the stone mount. These fake flinters were used by Hollywood for decades, saving a lot of production time. January 28, 1878. Dave Rudabaugh and a handful of tough cases attempt to rob the depot and a train in Kinsley, Kansas, a few miles from Dodge City. A vigilant night operator foils the plan. Ford County Sheriff Bat Masterson and 3 deputies, including J.J. Webb, go after the outlaws.